I'm Audrey Mitchell, 32, and I never thought I'd be walking into my brother's investor meeting uninvited. The look on James's face when I pushed through those mahogany doors, shock melting into fury, but I kept walking, my heels clicking against marble, until I reached the conference table. Making direct eye contact with the lead investor, I remembered James's words from 3 years ago. "You can't handle real business, Aud. Leave it to the big boys." I placed my folder on the table and watched panic flash across his face. I never intended things to go this far. Before I dive into this wild ride, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that subscribe button and like this video if you've ever had someone underestimate your potential. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how karma finally caught up to my golden boy brother. Growing up in Wellesley, an affluent Boston suburb, my brother James and I were raised in a world of privilege and expectations. Our father, Robert Mitchell, was a heavyweight investment banker who managed portfolios for New England's elite. Our mother, Diana, a former corporate lawyer who gave up her career to support the family, was brilliant but relegated to hosting dinner parties where Dad could network. Our sprawling colonial home with its manicured lawns set the stage for what would become a lifetime of competition. James was 4 years older than me, and from the beginning, he was the golden child. It wasn't just the age difference, it was a systematic preference that became our family's unspoken truth. When James brought home B- grades, Dad would clap him on the shoulder and say, "That's my boy, working hard." When I brought home straight A's, the response was typically, "That's nice, Audrey," without even a glance at my report card. I remember my 11th birthday when I received a calculator as a gift, while 6 months earlier, James had gotten a car for his 15th birthday. "James needs it to become independent," Mom had explained. "You'll understand when you're older." That calculator became a symbol of our family's dynamics. James was given wings, while I was given tools to help me count. In high school, I threw myself into everything: debate team captain, math club president, editor of the school newspaper, hoping someone would notice. James coasted through with average grades and a spot on the lacrosse team that made Dad beam with pride at games. "That's my son," he'd shout, while rarely making it to any of my academic competitions. When college application time came, I was accepted to Harvard with a partial scholarship. James had struggled to get into Wharton, requiring Dad to make some calls to friends on the admissions board. At the dinners celebrating my acceptance, Dad spent most of the evening telling James's friends how Wharton was the real breeding ground for business leaders. Harvard Business School changed something in me. For the first time, I was judged on merit alone. My professors recognized my analytical skills, my ability to see market patterns others missed. I graduated at the top of my class while James barely scraped through Wharton with a C average. Yet when we both returned home, Dad had already arranged James's first position at a prestigious firm through his connections. "What about Audrey?" Mom had asked timidly over dinner. "Audrey's smart. She'll figure something out," Dad responded, not looking up from his plate. James smirked across the table. "Yeah, maybe she can get a job teaching business to high school kids." I did figure something out. I landed a position at Goldman Sachs through a blind recruitment process where my resume spoke for itself. But even as I rose through the ranks, holiday gatherings remained exercises in invisibility. Dad and James would talk shop, discussing deals and market movements while I sat silently, despite handling portfolios twice the size of my brother's. "Banking is really just about relationships," James would announce at Thanksgiving dinner, winking at Dad. "Some people just understand how to connect with the right people." The subtext was clear. I might have the brains, but I lacked the social finesse. The irony was that my clients loved me precisely because I prioritized results over cocktail hours. By our late 20s, I had established a reputation in finance circles as someone with impeccable instincts. Industry blogs were mentioning my name. James, meanwhile, had bounced between 3 firms, always explaining his moves as strategic rather than the reality. He couldn't deliver consistent results. Finance is changing, James would say dismissively whenever my achievements came up. All this algorithm stuff Audrey does is just a fad. Real business happens on the golf course. What James failed to understand was that while he was swinging clubs, I was building relationships with a new generation of entrepreneurs who valued data over dynasties. The industry was indeed changing, but not in the direction he thought. The old boys network was weakening, and Merit was slowly winning over membership. But acknowledging that would mean admitting that the system that had always favored him was flawed. And James Mitchell was not a man who recognized his advantages. In his narrative, he had earned everything through grit and charm, the same way Dad had. The parallels they drew between themselves only strengthened their bond and pushed me further to the periphery of our family. Little did I know then that this lifelong rivalry was just the warm-up. The real battle was about to begin. After 7 years at Goldman Sachs, I had hit a ceiling, not because of my performance, but because of politics. The final straw came when my male colleague Tyler was promoted to managing director over me, despite my client portfolios outperforming his by 18%. When I questioned the decision, my supervisor awkwardly explained that Tyler fit the leadership image. Translation: he was a man who played golf with the right people. That night, I drafted my resignation letter and began planning my own venture. I'd been developing a fintech concept that would democratize investment opportunities for small businesses typically overlooked by traditional banks. My algorithm could assess risk more accurately than conventional methods, opening doors for women and minority-owned enterprises that often faced biased lending practices. 3 months later, Mitchell Financial Analytics was born. I launched with modest savings, a tiny office in Cambridge, and 3 brilliant programmers who shared my vision. Our initial success came from smaller investors who appreciated our innovative approach. We were profitable from our 6th month, unheard of for most startups. By the end of our first year, we were ready to scale. We needed a significant capital injection to expand our server capacity and hire more analysts. Despite my reluctance, I knew my family's connections could help secure the funding we needed. I scheduled a dinner at my parents' home, preparing a meticulous presentation that highlighted our success metrics and growth projections. Dad seemed genuinely interested, asking relevant questions about our client acquisition costs and retention rates. For once, I felt like he was seeing me, really seeing me, as a business person worthy of respect. Then James arrived, 40 minutes late, breezing in with the casual confidence of someone who's never been held accountable. "Sorry, had to wrap up a call with Singapore," he announced, though I suspected he'd been at the bar down the street. As I continued my presentation, I noticed James scrolling through his phone under the table, occasionally looking up to smirk. When I finished, Dad turned to James. "What do you think, son? You've got experience with these fintech startups." James's experience was a single failed investment in a cryptocurrency app that had folded within months. Nevertheless, he leaned forward with the authority of a seasoned venture capitalist. "It's cute, Aud," he said, using the diminutive nickname I'd always hated. "But you're playing in a saturated market with established competitors who will crush you once you're on their radar. The algorithm sounds impressive, but without proper market penetration strategy," he went on, using buzzwords that impressed Dad but made little sense together. I tried to counter with actual data, but James talked over me. By dessert, he'd effectively dismantled my business case, despite never having seen our proprietary technology or understanding our unique approach. "You can't handle real business, Aud," he concluded with a patronizing smile. "Leave it to the big boys. I'd hate to see you lose everything on this experiment." Dad nodded thoughtfully. "James makes some good points, Audrey. I think you should reconsider the scale of your ambitions." Just like that, my hope for family investment evaporated. Worse, within weeks, several potential investors who had expressed interest suddenly went cold. In meetings, they asked pointed questions that echoed James's criticisms. One even mentioned having spoken with someone who knows your family quite well. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. James was actively sabotaging my funding opportunities. When confronted over coffee, he didn't even deny it. "I'm doing you a favor," he said, stirring his latte. "You'll thank me when you're not bankrupt and embarrassed. If you persist with this little project, I'll have to be more direct about protecting our family's reputation in the industry." "Is that a threat?" I asked. "It's business," he shrugged. "If you can't handle this conversation, how do you expect to survive when real sharks come after you? Just take the hint, Aud. I'll crush this if I have to." I left that coffee shop shaking, not with fear, but with rage. 3 more investors backed out that week. My small team looked to me with concern as our runway shortened. We were weeks away from having to lay people off when Lindsay Parker called. Lindsay was a former tech executive who had recently started her own venture capital firm focused on women-led businesses. She'd heard about us not through traditional channels, but from one of our small business clients who had tripled revenue after securing funding through our platform. "I've done my homework on you, Audrey," she said during our first meeting. "And on your brother." My stomach dropped. "He's been quite vocal about your business," she continued. "But I've learned to be suspicious when mediocre men are threatened by innovative women." Lindsay invested $2 million for a 15% stake, enough to keep us afloat and expand our team. She also connected us with her network, opening doors that had been slammed shut by James's interference. By the end of our second year, Mitchell Financial Analytics had facilitated over $50 million in loans to previously underserved businesses, with a default rate half the industry average. Our success wasn't just surviving James's sabotage, it was proving his entire assessment wrong. 3 years passed in a blur of growth, challenges, and vindication. Mitchell Financial Analytics had transformed from a scrappy startup into a force within the industry, valued at $30 million after our latest funding round. Our client portfolio expanded across 43 states and into Canada, with plans for European markets on the horizon. What had begun as an algorithm had evolved into an ecosystem of financial services for underrepresented entrepreneurs. We'd built a team of 68 people, predominantly women who had been overlooked or pushed aside at traditional financial institutions. Their talent, finally unleashed in our meritocratic culture, drove innovations that left competitors scrambling to catch up. Jessica Winters, our brilliant CTO who'd been passed over for promotion at 3 previous companies, had refined our proprietary algorithm to include hundreds of non-traditional success indicators. While conventional banks assessed loan applicants based on credit scores and collateral, our system analyzed adaptive capacity, community integration, and operational efficiency. The result? We were identifying promising businesses that traditional metrics missed entirely. Business Insider featured us in their company's Reshaping Finance issue, calling me finance's new visionary, a title that would have seemed laughable to my family just a few years earlier. The article highlighted not just our financial success, but our social impact. 62% of our funded businesses were women-owned, and 47% were led by people of color. Our annual holiday party was electric that year. Looking around at my team celebrating our shared success, I felt a surge of gratitude. These were people who had believed in my vision when my own family hadn't. We'd built something meaningful together, not just profitable, but purposeful. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Congratulations on the Business Insider feature. Your father and I are so proud. Thanksgiving next week?" The invitation surprised me. I'd been keeping family interactions to a minimum, making excuses about work demands to avoid the awkwardness. But perhaps it was time to face them with my new confidence. Thanksgiving at the Mitchell household had always been a performance of perfect family dynamics for the benefit of extended relatives and my parents' friends. This year was no different in setup. Mom's immaculate table settings, Dad's carefully selected wines, but the underlying current had shifted. "There she is," Uncle Frank boomed as I entered, "the financial wizard herself." Cousins who had previously shown little interest in my career suddenly had questions about investment strategies. Aunt Patricia proudly mentioned showing the Business Insider article to her bridge club. Throughout it all, I noticed James in the corner, nursing a whiskey, his smile not reaching his eyes. Dad called for a toast before dinner. To both my children making waves in the business world, he said, raising his glass. The Mitchell legacy continues. It was the closest thing to equal acknowledgement we'd ever received, and I allowed myself to enjoy the moment despite knowing it was years overdue. Later, as I helped Mom with dessert, she whispered, "He really is proud, you know. He just doesn't know how to show it." "It's taken a $30 million valuation for him to notice," I replied, more bitterly than intended. "Men like your father and brother. They only understand success in terms they recognize," she said, surprising me with her candor. "You force them to recognize yours, even if it doesn't fit their template." Across the room, I caught James in conversation with Dad's former colleague. When he noticed me watching, he abruptly changed topics. I'd been hearing rumors about troubles at his firm, Titan Capital Partners, whispers about missed projections and investor dissatisfaction. But James maintained his usual facade of unshakable success. As the evening wound down, James cornered me by the coat closet. "Quite the show you've put on," he said, his breath sour with whiskey. "Got everyone fooled with your social justice banking. Very fashionable." "Our returns speak for themselves," I replied evenly. "Up 28% this quarter. Enjoy it while it lasts," he muttered. "This diversity trend will pass when investors remember what really matters." I smiled. "Is that what you tell yourself about Titan's performance lately?" His expression hardened. "Don't believe everything you hear. We're about to close a deal that will make your little success story look like a lemonade stand." Something in his tone bothered me, a desperate edge beneath the bravado. I dismissed it at the time as typical James posturing, but in retrospect, it was the first warning sign. Back at the office, we continued our expansion. We launched a foundation that provided financial literacy programs in underserved communities. We created an internship pipeline with historically Black colleges and universities. And we began developing a new venture fund specifically for green technology startups tackling climate change. Each initiative generated positive press, industry awards, and most importantly, real impact in communities that had been excluded from financial opportunity. We were proving that ethical business could also be profitable business, a concept that challenged the win-at-all-costs mentality that had shaped my father's and brother's careers. James's resentment became increasingly difficult to hide. At a charity gala where I received an award for innovation in finance, he loudly questioned to anyone who would listen whether social experiments belonged in the investment world. When our expansion into Chicago was covered by the Wall Street Journal, he sent me a text. "Daddy's connections in that town too. Watch your back." I'd learned to ignore his pettiness, focusing instead on our growth. But as my star rose, I began hearing more concerning rumors about Titan Capital. Staff turnover had reached alarming levels. They'd lost 2 major clients. Their last product launch had been delayed repeatedly. I didn't want to care. James had tried to destroy my business and had never apologized. But something told me his desperation might make him dangerous, not just to me, but to others who trusted him with their investments. What I didn't realize then was how prescient that worry would prove to be, or how deeply I would soon be pulled into the quicksand of his making. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning with the subject line, "Urgent, former Titan employee, need to speak." I almost deleted it, assuming it was someone trying to poach a job. But something in the wording caught my attention. "Concerns regarding your brother's business practices that may affect industry reputation." Rachel Morales had worked as a senior financial analyst at Titan Capital for 18 months before resigning 3 weeks earlier. She requested we meet off-site, away from my office. Under normal circumstances, I would have declined. Corporate espionage often begins with such clandestine approaches. But my instincts told me this wasn't about competitive advantage. We met at a quiet cafe in Cambridge, far from the financial district. Rachel was impeccably professional, Yale MBA, 5 years at Goldman before Titan, not someone who would risk her reputation lightly. "I've followed your career closely," she began, hands wrapped around her coffee mug. "Your ethical approach to finance is why I'm here. I couldn't go to the authorities without evidence, and I couldn't stay silent knowing what I know." She slid a flash drive across the table. "What am I looking at?" I asked, not touching it. "Financial statements. Two versions, the ones shown to investors and the actual internal numbers. Quarterly reports with fabricated growth metrics. Evidence of shell companies hiding massive debt. And documentation of intellectual property stolen from 3 smaller firms that were supposedly in partnership talks with Titan." My stomach clenched. "These are serious allegations." "They're not allegations, Miss Mitchell. They're facts. I personally created some of these reports under direct instruction from your brother. When I questioned the discrepancies, I was removed from client-facing roles. When I documented my concerns to the board, I was told to resign or be fired." I still hesitated to take the drive. "Why come to me? We're not exactly allies." Rachel met my gaze steadily. "Because you have the industry credibility to be heard. Because your reputation for integrity means people will listen. And because I believe you wouldn't protect someone just because they're family." That last part hit hard. Would I protect James despite everything? The Mitchell family code had always been clear. Family loyalty above all. "Mitchells protect Mitchells" was practically our motto, repeated by Dad whenever any of us faced external criticism. I took the drive but made no promises. "I need to verify this independently." Back at my office, I locked the door and plugged in the drive with trepidation. What I found was worse than Rachel had described. Titan had been systematically falsifying financial reports for at least 2 years. Their flagship investment fund, reported to be generating 18% returns, was actually down 4%. Client money was being used to pay earlier investors, essentially a Ponzi scheme with a veneer of legitimacy. Most disturbing were the detailed notes from board meetings where these issues were discussed openly, with solutions focused not on correction but on concealment. James's name was all over the documents, directing strategies to manage investor perception and create narrative consistency. I called Kimberly Chen, my CFO and most trusted advisor. "I need absolute confidentiality on this," I said after showing her the files. Kimberly's expression grew grimmer as she reviewed the documents. "This isn't just unethical, Audrey. It's criminal. Securities fraud, wire fraud, possibly RICO violations." "Are we certain these are authentic?" I asked, still hoping for some explanation. "I'd need to verify, but the formatting, account numbers, timestamps, they look legitimate. This level of detail would be nearly impossible to fabricate." I hired Samuel Hayes, a former FBI financial crimes specialist, to discreetly verify the information. His investigation not only confirmed Rachel's documents but uncovered additional evidence. James had been using investor money to maintain his lavish lifestyle, the Manhattan penthouse, the Hamptons summer home, the private jet membership, all while Titan was hemorrhaging cash. Most alarming was Sam's latest discovery. Titan was in final negotiations with Blackwell Capital, one of the largest investment firms on the East Coast, for an $85 million funding round. If completed, thousands of investors would be drawn into James's fraudulent operation, potentially losing their life savings when the house of cards inevitably collapsed. I barely slept for days, wrestling with my options. Exposing James would destroy him professionally and likely send him to prison. It would devastate our parents. The Mitchell name would become synonymous with fraud. But remaining silent meant becoming complicit. It meant allowing innocent people to be defrauded. It meant betraying everything I had built my company on: transparency, integrity, accountability. I remember standing at my living room window at 3 a.m., looking out at the Boston skyline, my reflection ghostly in the glass. What would I see in that reflection if I chose family loyalty over justice? Could I build a business on ethical principles while harboring knowledge of such blatant corruption? The decision crystallized not in a dramatic moment of clarity, but in the quiet accumulation of certainty. I hadn't built Mitchell Financial Analytics to be just another company. I'd created it as an alternative to the very system that allowed operations like Titan to flourish, where connections mattered more than competence, where optics trumped ethics. Before taking action, I needed to give James one chance. Not because he deserved it, but because I needed to know I'd done everything possible to resolve this without public destruction. I called him the next morning. "We need to talk, today, in person. It's not negotiable." His laugh was dismissive. "I'm booked solid with actual business, Aud. Whatever sisterly bonding you're looking for will have to wait. It's about Titan's financial reporting and your pending deal with Blackwell Capital." The silence on the line lasted just long enough to confirm everything. "My office. 1 hour," he finally said, his voice carefully controlled. I was walking into the lion's den, but this time I wasn't the same vulnerable prey I had once been. This time I carried truth, the most dangerous weapon against someone built on lies. James's office occupied the top floor of a sleek building in Boston's financial district. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the harbor, a power setting designed to intimidate. I was shown in by an assistant who eyed me nervously, suggesting rumors of trouble were already circulating internally. James stood behind his massive desk, jacket off, sleeves rolled up like he'd been hard at work rather than frantically preparing for this conversation. The family resemblance between us had always been strong, same dark hair and sharp features. But while I'd inherited our mother's thoughtful brown eyes, James had our father's steel blue gaze, now fixed on me with cold calculation. "Let's skip the pleasantries," he said. "What exactly do you think you know about my business?" I placed a folder on his desk, printouts of the most damning documents. "I know that Titan Capital is insolvent. I know you've been falsifying returns. I know about the shell companies hiding your debt. And I know Blackwell Capital is about to invest $85 million based on fraudulent information." He flipped through the pages, his expression unchanging, but I noticed the slight tremor in his hands. "Where did you get these?" he asked, voice dangerously quiet. "That's irrelevant. What matters is what you're going to do about it." He closed the folder and leaned back, a smile playing at his lips. "And what exactly would you like me to do, little sister?" "Withdraw from the Blackwell deal. Inform your board of the actual financial situation. Begin making arrangements to return investor funds. And self-report to the SEC." James's laugh was genuine this time. "That's your solution? Financial suicide? It's the only way to avoid criminal charges." "This isn't a game, James. People will lose everything when this collapses." "If," he corrected, "if it collapses. Business is about risk management, Audrey. You've never understood that. Fraud isn't risk management, it's a crime." He stood suddenly, circling the desk to tower over me. "Let me explain something. If you take these accusations public, I'll sue you for defamation. I'll tie up your company in so much litigation you'll be bankrupt before the first hearing. And I'll make sure everyone knows your accusations stem from a pathetic lifetime of jealousy." I held my ground. The documents speak for themselves. Documents can be manipulated. You, of all people, should know how easy it is to create a narrative with selective information. He moved closer, his voice softening to a threatening intimacy. "Did it ever occur to you that this might be an orchestrated attack on me? That someone might be using my naive sister as a pawn?" For a moment, doubt flickered. James had always been convincing. It was his superpower. But the evidence was too comprehensive, the pattern too clear. "We're done here," I said, turning to leave. "If you walk out that door with those documents, you're no longer my sister." The declaration was meant to wound, to leverage our family bond against my conscience. I paused at the door. "I stopped being your sister the moment you decided fraud was acceptable. I'm just sorry I didn't realize it sooner." Within days, I discovered the true depth of James's betrayal. An industry newsletter published a thinly veiled hit piece questioning the validity of Mitchell Financial Analytics' algorithm, suggesting it had been built on stolen concepts. My largest client called to express concerns about risk exposure, using language that echoed talking points I recognized as James's. Through back channels, I learned James had embarked on a systematic campaign to undermine my company. He had approached my key team members with lucrative job offers. Thankfully, all had declined, but reported the attempts to me. He had met privately with my biggest client, suggesting that my company was under regulatory scrutiny. He had even hired a data scientist to publish a paper questioning the mathematical foundations of our risk assessment model. Most painfully, he had gotten to our parents. Mom called, her voice tight with worry. Your father and I don't understand what's happening between you two, but James says you're spreading rumors about Titan Capital. He says you're jealous of his success and trying to damage the family name. That's not true, I began, but she cut me off. He showed us the article about your algorithm. Is that why you're doing this? Because your company is struggling? The betrayal cut deep. Not just that James would lie so comprehensively, but that my parents would so readily believe him over me, despite my proven track record. My company is fine, I said flatly. Ask Dad to look at our financials, instead of just taking James's word. Audrey, we're just concerned about this vindictiveness. It's not like you. The conversation ended with nothing resolved. My mother, always the peacemaker, suggested I should come for dinner to work things out as a family. As if fraud affecting thousands of people was a simple sibling squabble to be resolved over pot roast. The next morning brought news that we'd lost the Miller account, a $3 million contract that had been all but finalized the previous week. Our stock dropped 15% following an anonymous industry analysis questioning our growth projections. 2 job candidates withdrew their applications, citing concerns about company stability. James was systematically trying to destroy what I'd built. Not content with just protecting himself, he wanted to ensure I had nothing to stand on when the dust settled. Team morale began to suffer as rumors circulated. I called an all-hands meeting to address the situation without divulging details that could compromise potential legal actions. We're facing some headwinds, I acknowledged to my assembled staff. There are forces attempting to undermine what we've built together. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. I saw the concern on their faces, people who had bet their careers on my vision, many leaving secure positions at established firms. What I can promise you is this. Mitchell Financial Analytics was built on integrity. That will not change, no matter how strong the pressure becomes. We have the capital, the clients, and most importantly, the truth on our side. I'm asking for your trust as we navigate this storm. Melissa Johnson, our head of client relations, stood up. We're not going anywhere, Audrey. We believe in what we're doing here. The room erupted in applause, bringing unexpected tears to my eyes. In that moment, I realized what James had never understood. True loyalty can't be bought or coerced. It's earned through consistent action and shared values. As the crisis continued, I received an unexpected call from Hannah Baker, CEO of Blackwell Capital. I'm hearing concerning things about Titan Capital, she said without preamble, and about your company as well. Since the Mitchell name is attached to both, I thought it worth a direct conversation. My heart raced. Hannah Baker was a legend in investment circles, known for her razor-sharp judgment and zero tolerance for nonsense. Blackwell Capital managed over $12 billion in assets. I appreciate that, I said carefully, unsure whether she was fishing for information or already knew the truth. Let me be direct, Miss Mitchell. We're in final due diligence for a significant investment in Titan. Simultaneously, I'm hearing rumors about impropriety there, while your company is being attacked in ways that seem coordinated. As someone with a reputation for candor, I'm interested in your perspective. I took a deep breath. This conversation could change everything. I'd be happy to discuss this with you, Miss Baker, but not over the phone. Some matters require supporting documentation. I'm in Boston tomorrow. My office, 2 p.m. The line went dead before I could respond. As I stared at the phone, I realized I had reached the moment of decision. Whatever I shared with Hannah Baker would set irreversible events in motion. The last bridges to my brother, and possibly my family, would burn. That night, as I prepared the documentation, my phone buzzed with a text from James. "Heard about your meeting with Baker. Remember, Mitchells protect Mitchells. Don't make me destroy you completely." The threat only strengthened my resolve. James had crossed too many lines. He had betrayed not just me, but every principle of honest business. Worse, he had betrayed the trust of countless investors who would suffer when his scheme inevitably collapsed. I was no longer fighting just for my company or my reputation. I was fighting for every person who would be harmed if I remained silent. The time for family loyalty had passed. The time for truth had arrived. The day after James's threat, our company's stock dropped another 15%. The market was responding to a coordinated whisper campaign, questioning everything from our algorithm's effectiveness to our financial stability. Clients were calling hourly, seeking reassurance. 2 senior analysts requested meetings to discuss their concerns about the company's direction. I stood in the bathroom of our office, hands gripping the cool marble of the sink, staring at my reflection. Dark circles shadowed my eyes from nights of minimal sleep. My carefully constructed world was under siege, not from market forces or legitimate competition, but from my own blood. "Audrey?" Kimberly knocked softly before entering. "The team's waiting for the strategy meeting. I'll be right there." She hesitated. "Are you okay?" "No," I admitted. "But I will be." In the conference room, my leadership team sat around the table. Brilliant professionals who had believed in our mission enough to join a company challenging the status quo. Their faces showed concern but not defeat. They were warriors, and they deserved a general who would fight alongside them. "The attacks are coordinated and personal," I began without preamble. "I won't insult you with corporate spin. This isn't about market conditions or normal competition. This is about my brother using every weapon in his arsenal to destroy us, because he sees us as a threat." The room was silent, processing the directness of my admission. "Why now?" asked Marcus, our head of product development. "We've been successful for years. Why is Titan suddenly coming after us?" I had been wrestling with how much to reveal. Full transparency might protect them, but it could also make them unwitting participants in a legal minefield. "I have reason to believe Titan Capital is facing serious internal issues," I said carefully. "Our success highlights their weaknesses. I'm meeting with Hannah Baker at Blackwell Capital tomorrow. That meeting may determine much of what happens next." We spent the next hour developing contingency plans, how to reassure clients, maintain team morale, and shore up our financial position against further attacks. As the meeting concluded, I asked Kimberly to stay behind. "What's your honest assessment?" I asked once we were alone. "We have runway for about 8 months at current burn rate. If we lose 2 more major clients, that drops to 5 months. Her expression was grave but steady. "The fundamentals of our business are sound, Audrey. The algorithm works. Our client results are exceptional. This is a reputation war, not a product failure. And if the reputation war escalates," she didn't sugarcoat it, "then we'll need to consider strategic options, including potential acquisition by a larger firm that can weather the storm." The thought of losing independence after everything we'd built was nauseating, but I nodded. "Prepare the scenarios. I need to know our options." That evening, I received an unexpected call from Sandra Wilson, my former mentor at Goldman Sachs, and one of the few women to break into the upper echelons of investment banking. "I'm hearing troubling things about you and Mitchell Analytics," she said, her no-nonsense tone unchanged from when she'd supervised me years ago. "It's complicated," I replied. "It always is. Have dinner with me tonight." 2 hours later, we sat in a quiet corner of a restaurant far from the financial district. Sandra, now in her 60s with steel gray hair and penetrating eyes, ordered Scotch neat and waited for me to speak. I told her everything. The fraudulent documents, James's threats, the coordinated attacks, my upcoming meeting with Hannah Baker. It poured out like a confession. the weight of weeks of isolated decision-making lifting slightly as I shared it. "You know what you have to do," she said when I finished. "You've known from the beginning. If I go public with what I know, I destroy my brother. I become the person who sent a family member to prison. If you don't, you become complicit in fraud that will hurt thousands of people." She leaned forward. "Let me tell you something I learned over 40 years in this business. Men like your brother count on people, especially women, being too nice to hold them accountable. They rely on our socialization to avoid conflict, to keep peace, to protect relationships even at our own expense." She took a sip of her scotch. "The question isn't whether you'll destroy your brother. James has already destroyed himself. The question is whether you'll let him destroy you and countless innocent investors in the process." Her words crystallized what I'd been circling for weeks. James had made his choices knowing the potential consequences. He wasn't considering the impact on our family when he threatened me or undermined my company. He was thinking only of himself. "The Blackwell meeting," I said slowly. "If I show Hannah everything, their investment will be dead, and so will Titan." Sandra nodded. "But Blackwell has the resources to ensure an orderly unwinding rather than a collapse. They can help minimize damage to innocent parties." "James will never forgive me." "Probably not." Her expression softened slightly. "But could you forgive yourself if you stayed silent?" That night, my phone rang again. Hannah Baker herself, calling at Seminantipolu PM. "Miss Mitchell, I've had another conversation with your brother today. He made some concerning allegations about your company's practices and suggested you might try to undermine his relationship with Blackwell out of competitive jealousy." My heart sank. James was getting ahead of me, poisoning the well. "I see. He was quite persuasive," she continued, "until he made a critical error. He claimed your algorithm has never been independently verified for accuracy. My team found 3 separate academic papers validating your methodology." I exhaled slowly. "Miss Baker, I don't appreciate being manipulated, Miss Mitchell. Our meeting tomorrow has become even more important. Bring everything you have. And I do mean everything." After we hung up, I received a text from my best friend Tara. "You've been ghosting me for weeks. Whatever crisis you're handling, you're not doing it alone tonight. I'm coming over with wine." Tara had been my roommate at Harvard and knew my family dynamics intimately. When she arrived, one look at my face told her everything. "James," she said. It wasn't a question. We sat on my balcony overlooking the city lights, and I confided my fears about the next day's meeting. "Dad always said Mitchells protect Mitchells," I whispered. "What does it say about me that I'm about to do the opposite?" "That code only works when all Mitchells are protecting each other," Tara replied. "James abandoned it the moment he tried to destroy you. This isn't about family loyalty anymore. It's about right and wrong." As midnight approached, I made my final decision. I organized every piece of evidence into a comprehensive dossier: the falsified financial statements, the shell company documentation, the board meeting notes, witness statements from Rachel and others, the pattern of attacks against my company. This wasn't about sibling rivalry or evening old scores. It was about preventing harm to countless people who would be devastated when Titan inevitably collapsed. It was about standing for the principles I'd built my company on: transparency, integrity, accountability. I thought about my father's disappointment, my mother's heartbreak. I thought about holiday dinners that would never be the same. I thought about becoming the family pariah, the one who broke the code of silence that had protected James his entire life. Then I thought about the people who had trusted me, my team, my clients, even Hannah Baker, who was expecting complete honesty tomorrow. I couldn't protect James without betraying them all. The path forward was clear, but that didn't make it any less painful. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Some decisions change the trajectory of your life permanently. This was one of them. I closed my laptop at 2 a.m., the dossier complete and ready for tomorrow's meeting. Whatever happened next, I would face it knowing I had chosen integrity over blind loyalty, Truth over comfortable lies. The Mitchell family code was broken, but perhaps a better one would rise from its ashes. Blackwell Capital occupied a stunning glass tower in downtown Boston, its sleek architecture projecting the confidence of a firm that managed billions. The security desk called up to confirm my appointment, and I was escorted to a private elevator that whisked me to the top floor. The boardroom doors were imposing, dark wood with subtle brass inlays. I took a deep breath, clutching my portfolio case containing all the evidence I'd compiled. Whatever happened next would change lives, including my own, irrevocably. I pushed through the doors without knocking. The scene inside froze at my entrance. Around a massive conference table sat Blackwell's executive team. I recognized Hannah Baker at the head, her silver bob and piercing gaze unmistakable. Beside her was Charles Wilson, Blackwell's legendary chief investment officer. Representatives from their legal department filled several seats, identifiable by their serious expressions and notepads. And there, standing at the front of the room mid-presentation, was James. His PowerPoint slide showed Titan Capital's supposedly impressive growth projections, the very numbers I knew to be fabricated. When he saw me, his expression shifted from shock to fury to a forced smile in the span of seconds. "Audrey," he said smoothly, "this is a surprise. We're in the middle of a private meeting." Hannah Baker stood. "Actually, I invited Miss Mitchell. Please, Audrey, join us." The atmosphere crackled with tension as I took a seat directly across from James. He maintained his composure, but I could see the subtle tells of his anxiety, the slight tightening around his eyes, the way his right hand curled into a partial fist. As I was explaining, James continued, attempting to regain control, Titan Capital is positioned for exponential growth in the next quarter. Our proprietary trading strategies have consistently outperformed market indices by 17%, I interrupted. According to your investor materials, that's an impressive number. James nodded cautiously. We've worked hard to achieve those returns. I opened my portfolio and slid a document across the table to Hannah. This is Titan's actual performance for the past 4 quarters, showing a negative return of 4.3%. The room went silent. Hannah examined the document, then passed it to Charles Wilson. "This is confidential internal information," James sputtered, color rising in his face. "Where did you get that?" I ignored him, continuing to distribute documents around the table. These are records of shell companies established to hide Titan's debt obligations. This folder contains evidence of falsified client accounts. And this, I slid the thickest folder toward Hannah, is documentation of how investor funds were diverted for personal use. James slammed his hand on the table. "This is absurd. She's trying to sabotage our deal because her company is failing. Audrey has been jealous of my success for years. Ask anyone in our family." Hannah's expression remained impassive as she reviewed the materials. "These allegations are extremely serious, Mr. Mitchell. We'll need to verify this information independently." "By all means," I said. "You'll find everything can be confirmed. The former employees who provided statements are willing to speak directly with your team." James's demeanor shifted to desperation. "This is a coordinated attack. She's manipulated disgruntled ex-employees into making false statements. Hannah, we've known each other for years. Would I risk my reputation on fabricated numbers?" Hannah looked between us, her experienced eyes taking in every nuance of our body language. "Charles, take our team to the conference room and begin verification procedures." "I'd like to speak with the Mitchells alone." When the room had cleared except for the 3 of us, Hannah's professional demeanor softened slightly. "I've been in this business for 30 years, she said. "I've seen family rivalries, corporate sabotage, and genuine fraud. What I need to know, right now, is what exactly is happening here." James jumped in before I could speak. "My sister has been trying to undermine me since we were children. When her company started struggling, she became desperate. These documents are either fabricated or taken completely out of context." "The documents speak for themselves," I said quietly. "Verify them. You'll find everything I've presented is accurate. Hannah studied me. What do you gain from this, Audrey? If these allegations prove true, it will damage the Mitchell name that your company bears. I gain nothing, I admitted. In fact, I'll likely lose clients in the short term when this becomes public. But there are thousands of investors who will lose everything if Titan collapses after taking your money. James scoffed. Always the saint, aren't you? The ethical one, the righteous one. Tell me, does it make you feel powerful to finally have something over me? This isn't about us, I said, meeting his gaze. It's about the truth. The truth? James's laugh was bitter. The truth is you've been waiting for this moment your entire life. Poor, overlooked Audrey, finally getting her revenge. Hannah raised her hand, silencing his tirade. I'm going to check these documents with our team. Wait here, both of you. When the door closed behind her, James turned to me, his facade of control completely gone. Do you have any idea what you've done? He hissed. You've just destroyed everything I've built. You destroyed it yourself, James. I just exposed the truth before more people got hurt. He moved closer, voice dropping to a threatening whisper. I will make it my life's mission to ruin you for this. When I'm done, Mitchell Financial Analytics won't exist, and neither will your reputation. I refuse to be intimidated. You've been trying to destroy me for years. It didn't work when I was vulnerable, and it won't work now. You think you're so much better than me, he sneered. Little Miss Perfect with her ethical company and her diverse team. You know what your problem is, Audrey? You actually believe your own press. And you know what your problem is, James? You've never had to face consequences. Your whole life, you've been protected by Dad, by your connections, by the family name. That ends today. His expression shifted, and for a moment, I glimpsed something I'd never seen in my brother before, fear. You don't understand what you're doing, he said, voice suddenly quiet. There are people involved in this who won't just accept failure. People who expected returns. Then you should have thought of that before you started falsifying numbers. Before he could respond, the door opened. Hannah returned with Charles Wilson and 2 members of Blackwell's legal team. Hannah's expression was grim. We've verified enough to have serious concerns about the information presented to us by Titan Capital. She turned to James. We're suspending all discussions regarding investment immediately pending a full investigation. James's face went pale. You can't do that. We're too far along in the process. Actually, we can and we are, said Charles Wilson. Our due diligence team has confirmed discrepancies in your reported assets under management. That alone is enough to halt proceedings. This is all a misunderstanding, James insisted, desperation evident in his voice. Give me 48 hours to clarify the situation. Hannah shook her head. Blackwell Capital will be formally withdrawing from all investment discussions with Titan Capital Partners, effective immediately. Furthermore, we are obligated to report potential securities fraud to the appropriate regulatory authorities. James's composure shattered. This is her fault, he shouted, pointing at me. She's been planning this for years. You have no idea what she's capable of. Mr. Mitchell, Hannah said firmly, I suggest you leave now and contact your legal counsel. Security was called when James refused to exit quietly. As they escorted him out, his threats echoed down the hallway. This isn't over, Audrey. You've just signed your own professional death warrant. In the sudden quiet after his departure, I found myself alone with Hannah and Charles. That couldn't have been easy, Hannah said, studying me with new respect. It wasn't, I admitted. But it was necessary. You've potentially saved our firm from a significant loss, Charles added. Not many people would have the courage to do what you did today, especially against family. Hannah walked me to the elevator. What will you do now? She asked. Go back to running my company the way I always have, with honesty and integrity. She nodded thoughtfully. The financial world could use more of that. When the dust settles from this situation, I'd like to discuss potential opportunities between Blackwell and Mitchell Analytics. As the elevator doors closed, I leaned against the wall, finally allowing the enormity of what had just happened to wash over me. I had ended my brother's career and likely sent him toward criminal prosecution. The Mitchell family would never be the same. But I had done the right thing. In a world where financial misconduct was too often hidden behind closed doors and family connections, I had chosen truth over protection. The consequences would be painful, but I would face them knowing my conscience was clear. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone was already ringing with calls from my parents. The real fallout was just beginning. News travels like wildfire in financial circles. By the time I returned to my office, industry blogs were already reporting that Blackwell Capital had abruptly terminated investment discussions with Titan Capital. Speculation ran rampant, from rumors of irreconcilable differences over company valuation to whispers about potential regulatory issues. My leadership team was waiting in the conference room, faces tense with anticipation. "It's done," I said simply. Blackwell pulled out of the investment. Kimberly was the first to ask the question everyone was thinking. What happens now, professionally or personally? I attempted a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Professionally, we continue building our company. Personally, I'm about to find out. My phone had been buzzing continuously since leaving Blackwell's offices, calls from my parents, texts from James that oscillated between threats and desperate pleas, messages from extended family members who had already caught wind that something significant had happened. "I need to deal with my family," I told the team. "In the meantime, prepare for scrutiny. When the full story breaks, Mitchell Financial Analytics will be mentioned. Reassure our clients that our operations remain unchanged. Emphasize that our commitment to transparency is why we couldn't remain silent about fraudulent practices, even when family was involved." I drove to my parents' home in Wellesley that evening. The imposing colonial where I'd grown up looked exactly the same. Pristine gardens, perfect paint, the appearance of order and stability. Inside, however, was chaos. My father paced the living room, phone pressed to his ear, face flushed with anger. My mother sat rigidly on the sofa, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Both looked up when I entered, their expressions a blend of shock, fury, and confusion. "What have you done?" Dad demanded, ending his call. "James just called from his lawyer's office. He says you've destroyed his company, that you brought false accusations to his investors." "They weren't false," I said calmly, setting my purse down. "I had evidence of securities fraud, Dad. Extensive evidence. So you took it to his investors? Without coming to me first?" He was shouting now. "Without giving your brother a chance to explain?" "I gave James a chance," I countered. "I went to him privately with the evidence. He threatened to sue me and destroy my company." Mom spoke for the first time, her voice quivering. "But Audrey, this is your brother, your family." "Yes, he's my brother. The same brother who tried to sabotage my business multiple times. The same brother who told Dad not to invest in my company. The same brother who's been falsifying financial reports and defrauding investors." "You don't understand the pressures James has been under," Dad insisted. "The financial world is complicated." "Don't," I interrupted, anger finally breaking through my composed exterior. "Don't you dare suggest fraud is just a complex business practice. I'm in the financial world too, remember? The part you've never taken seriously." The doorbell rang, cutting through the tension. Mom rose to answer it, returning moments later with James. He'd clearly been drinking, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, eyes bloodshot. "Here she is," he announced bitterly. "The family executioner." "James," Mom pleaded, "let's all sit down and discuss this calmly." He ignored her, stalking toward me. "Satisfied now, Audrey? My office is being packed up as we speak. The SEC has already called. Clients are pulling their investments in droves." "I didn't want this," I said quietly. "Bullshit," he shouted. "You've been waiting for this moment your entire life." Poor, overlooked Audrey, finally getting her revenge. Dad stepped between us. "James, that's enough. Audrey, You need to understand what you've set in motion. The Mitchell name will be dragged through the mud. Your company will suffer by association. I know exactly what I've set in motion, I replied. I've prevented thousands of investors from losing their money in a fraudulent scheme. And if that damages the mighty Mitchell name, then maybe that name wasn't what we thought it was. James laughed humorlessly. She still doesn't get it, Dad. Tell her. Tell her about the Carlyle deal in '08. Tell her about the Anderson merger. My father's face paled. That's enough, James. But James was beyond restraint. You think Dad built his career playing by the rules? You think his hands are clean? The only difference between me and him is that he never got caught. My mother gasped. I stood frozen, looking at my father, waiting for his denial. It didn't come. Is that true? I asked. Dad's silence was answer enough. Jesus, I whispered. It's not just James, is it? It's the whole family ethos. You don't understand, Dad finally said. Business requires flexibility with certain regulations. It's not black and white. Actually, fraud is pretty black and white, Dad. James slumped onto the sofa, the fight suddenly gone from him. You've really done it this time, Aud. And you don't even know the half of it. What does that mean? He looked up, eyes haunted. You think I was the only one taking risks? There are people involved in Titan's investments who don't accept failure. People who expected their returns. A chill ran through me. Are you saying? I'm saying you've put targets on all our backs, he whispered, including your own. My mother began to cry quietly. My father moved to comfort her, and James stared vacantly at the floor. The perfect Mitchell family tableau was shattered beyond recognition. Uncle Philip arrived next, followed by Aunt Caroline, Dad's siblings, both involved in various Mitchell family businesses. Soon the house filled with extended family, all demanding explanations, all taking sides. Uncle Philip blamed me for not keeping things in the family. Aunt Caroline suggested I'd always been difficult and overly righteous. Cousin William, who worked at Titan, accused me of destroying his career out of petty jealousy. Standing in the midst of their accusations, I realized a devastating truth. None of them were shocked by what James had done. They were only shocked that I had exposed it. Mitchells protect Mitchells, Uncle Philip kept repeating. It's the family code. Even when Mitchells are committing crimes? I challenged. Especially then, he answered without hesitation. I looked around at these people, my family, and felt like I was seeing them clearly for the first time. The values I'd thought we shared, integrity, honesty, fairness, weren't family values at all. They were my values, ones I'd developed despite my upbringing, not because of it. I can't do this, I said, moving toward the door. I won't apologize for doing what's right. My father followed me to the porch. Audrey, wait. You don't understand what this will do to your mother, to our family name. I understand perfectly, Dad. I just disagree about what matters more, our family's reputation or actual justice. His expression hardened. Then you've made your choice. Yes, I said quietly. I have. As I drove away, my phone pinged with a text from James. This isn't over. If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me. The next week was a blur of crisis management. As predicted, Mitchell Financial Analytics faced scrutiny by association. Some clients, nervous about the Mitchell name being linked to fraud allegations, withdrew their business. Industry colleagues I'd thought were friends suddenly became unavailable for meetings or calls, but others stood firmly with us. Lindsay Parker, my original investor, publicly declared her continued confidence in our company. Several major clients issued statements supporting our ethical stance. And unexpectedly, a wave of new business inquiries came in from companies specifically seeking financial partners with proven integrity. The personal toll was heavier. My mother stopped taking my calls. Extended family members I'd been close to growing up now viewed me as a traitor. James, true to his word, was doing everything possible to damage my reputation, spreading rumors, contacting my clients, even attempting to plant negative stories in the financial press. Most disturbing were the anonymous threats that began arriving at my office and home. vague warnings about watching my back and consequences for betrayal. I couldn't prove they were coming from James, but the timing was suspicious. Security cameras were installed at my apartment. I varied my routes to work. For the first time in my life, I felt physically unsafe. 3 weeks after the confrontation at Blackwell Capital, I received a call from my father's assistant. Your father has requested a family meeting this Sunday. All Mitchells are expected to attend. Why? I asked. He didn't share that information, Miss Mitchell. He only said it's mandatory. Against my better judgment, I agreed to go. Maybe, I thought hopefully, this was an attempt at reconciliation. The hope died when I arrived at my parents' home to find it filled with somber-faced relatives, all seated formally in the living room as if at a funeral. My father stood before the fireplace, my mother beside him looking years older than when I'd seen her last. James sat in an armchair, subdued but with a hint of satisfaction in his expression. Now that everyone is here, my father began, I need to address the situation our family faces. As you all know, Titan Capital is under investigation. James has been cooperating with the authorities. The euphemism for pleading guilty wasn't lost on anyone. In light of recent events, I've made some difficult decisions. He looked directly at me. Audrey, your actions have endangered this family's standing and security. While you may have believed you were doing the right thing, you broke our most sacred rule. Mitchells protect Mitchells. My heart sank as I realized what was coming. Until you demonstrate loyalty to this family above your personal moral crusade, you are no longer welcome in this house or at family gatherings. Your invitation to Mitchell family events is revoked indefinitely. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Being cut off from the Mitchell family was unprecedented. We closed ranks. We didn't expel members. Dad, I said, standing to face him, you're excommunicating me for exposing actual crimes while embracing the person who committed them? I'm protecting this family, he replied firmly. Something you've forgotten how to do. The finality in his voice was unmistakable. I looked around at the faces of my relatives, some avoiding my gaze, some watching with quiet approval, a few with conflicted expressions. No one spoke in my defense. As I walked out of my childhood home, possibly for the last time, a strange sense of peace washed over me. I had lost my family, but I had kept my integrity. The path forward would be difficult, but it would be my own, built on truth rather than convenient lies, on real achievement rather than protected privilege. In the car, I allowed myself a moment of grief for what had been lost. Then I straightened my shoulders and started the engine. The Mitchell family, as I had known it, was behind me now. It was time to build something better. 6 months passed in a blur of rebuilding. Mitchell Financial Analytics weathered the initial storm of association with the Titan scandal and emerged stronger, our commitment to transparency attracting clients who valued ethical practice over family connections. Our stock had not only recovered but surpassed previous levels as the market responded to our consistent performance and principled stance. I had settled into a new normal, one without family gatherings or holiday dinners, without the background noise of Mitchell family drama that had been the soundtrack to my life. The silence was sometimes deafening, but also clarifying. Without the constant need to prove myself to my father or compete with James, I could focus entirely on building the company I believed in. On a rainy Tuesday morning, my assistant interrupted a budget meeting. Your mother is in the lobby. She doesn't have an appointment. My heart raced. I hadn't spoken to my mother since the family excommunication. Send her up. Diana Mitchell looked smaller somehow, her usual perfect appearance slightly disheveled. When the office door closed behind her, she stood awkwardly, as if unsure of her welcome. Hi, Mom. Hello, Audrey. She glanced around my office, the awards on the wall, the view of Boston Harbor, the evidence of success she had never fully acknowledged. You've done well for yourself. Thank you. I gestured to the seating area. Would you like to sit? We sat across from each other, the distance between us measured in more than just feet. I've left your father, she said abruptly. Temporarily, at least. I'm staying with my sister in Cambridge. The news stunned me. In 35 years of marriage, my mother had never defied my father in any meaningful way. What happened? She twisted her wedding ring, a nervous habit I'd forgotten. After the family meeting, things changed. Your father became obsessed with damage control. The investigations into Titan affected his business relationships. The Mitchell name wasn't opening doors the way it used to. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in my father's difficulties. Don't be, she said with unexpected firmness. It needed to happen. Robert has been protected from consequences his entire life. So has James. I allowed it. I encouraged it. Her eyes met mine directly. I failed you, Audrey. Mom. No, let me finish. I saw how differently your father treated you and James. I saw the unfairness. But I told myself that's just how things were. Boys needed more support in business. Girls would find other paths. I was wrong. Her voice cracked slightly. When you started succeeding on your own, I was proud but also confused. It challenged everything I'd accepted about how the world worked. She reached across the table, tentatively taking my hand. When you exposed James's fraud, I was angry because it disrupted our family. But the truth is, our family was already broken. We just pretended otherwise. The honesty in her words brought tears to my eyes. I never wanted to hurt the family, Mom. I just couldn't be part of the deception anymore. I know that now. She squeezed my hand. The SEC investigation found even more than you knew. James has agreed to a plea deal. He'll serve time, but less than he might have. The news wasn't surprising, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. My brother would go to prison because of my actions. Justified actions, necessary actions, but mine nonetheless. And Dad? Some of his past arrangements are being scrutinized. Nothing criminal, but enough to damage his reputation. She smiled sadly. He blames you, of course. It's easier than accepting responsibility. We talked for hours, beginning the slow, painful process of rebuilding a relationship based on truth rather than appearance. Before she left, Mom surprised me with a request. The Mitchell Family Foundation for Women in Business. I'd like to work with your company on it. I have ideas about how we could help young women navigate male-dominated industries. It was the first time my mother had ever expressed interest in my professional world. I'd like that very much. The foundation became our bridge back to each other. Working together, we discovered common ground we'd never known existed. My mother, it turned out, had a keen understanding of the barriers women faced in business. She'd spent her life navigating them, even if she'd never openly challenged them. 2 months later, I received an unexpected email from Hannah Baker at Blackwell Capital. I'd like to discuss a potential partnership. Are you available for lunch tomorrow? Over seafood at a quiet waterfront restaurant, Hannah laid out a surprising proposal. Blackwell was impressed by your handling of the Titan situation, she said. Your willingness to prioritize ethical behavior over family ties is rare in this industry. It cost me my family, I admitted, and gained you respect from those who matter. She passed me a folder. We're establishing a new division focused on financial ethics and compliance. We'd like Mitchell Financial Analytics to be a partner in this venture. The proposal outlined a collaboration that would leverage our proprietary algorithm to identify potential fraud patterns in investment activities, essentially turning the technology that had made us successful into a tool for cleaning up the industry. Why us? I asked. Blackwell has resources to build this in-house. Hannah smiled. Because you've demonstrated that your commitment to integrity isn't just marketing. When it mattered, you chose truth over personal benefit. That's the partner we want. The irony wasn't lost on me. The scandal that James had predicted would destroy my career was now opening doors to opportunities I'd never imagined. As spring turned to summer, another unexpected development occurred. My father called. I'd like to meet, he said, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. Just the two of us. We met at a neutral location, a bench overlooking the Charles River where I'd often come to think during my Harvard days. My father looked older, the events of the past year etched in the new lines on his face. We sat in silence for several minutes, watching rowing teams glide across the water. "Your mother tells me the foundation is doing well," he finally said. "It is. We've established mentorship programs at 5 universities." He nodded, eyes still on the river. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Audrey, about the kind of man I've been, the kind of father." I waited, hardly daring to hope for what might come next. "I was wrong," he said simply. "Not just about James, though God knows I enabled his worst instincts, but about you. I never gave you the credit you deserved. I never saw." He paused, collecting himself. "I never saw that you were the true business person in the family. You built something real, something that would have succeeded even without the Mitchell name. Dad, let me finish." He finally turned to look at me. "I was raised to believe that business was about winning at all costs, that rules were for people without the courage to break them. I taught James the same thing, and look where it got him." His voice broke. "He reports to prison next month." The pain in his eyes was real, and for the first time, I saw my father not as the intimidating figure who had shaped my childhood, but as a man facing the consequences of his own flawed worldview. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he continued, "but I wanted you to know that I'm proud of you, Audrey. You stood by your principles, even when it cost you everything. That takes a kind of courage I never had." It wasn't a full reconciliation. Too much had happened for that. But it was a beginning, a crack in the wall that had divided us for so long. The news about James came a week later. He had entered a rehabilitation program while awaiting his prison sentence, finally addressing the substance abuse issues that had fueled some of his worst decisions. His lawyer delivered a letter to my office. "Audrey," it read, "I wish I could say I've forgiven you, but I'm not there yet. The therapists here talk about taking responsibility for our own actions, so I'll say this much. I made the choices that led me here. I still believe you betrayed me, but I understand why you felt you had no choice. Maybe someday we can talk about it. Until then, I'm trying to learn from my mistakes." James. It wasn't an apology, but from James, it was unprecedented acknowledgement. A small step, but a step nonetheless. As summer turned to fall, Mitchell Financial Analytics continued to grow. Our partnership with Blackwell Capital brought new prestige and opportunities. The foundation's work expanded, with my mother emerging as a surprisingly effective advocate for women in finance. My father and I established a cautious new relationship, not the unquestioning devotion he had once expected, nor the desperate need for approval I had once felt, but something more equal. He began consulting for our foundation, using his decades of connections to open doors that had previously been closed to women entrepreneurs. The Mitchell family would never be what it once was. The facade of perfection was permanently broken. But perhaps what was emerging from the rubble was something more authentic, more valuable. 1 year to the day after the confrontation at Blackwell Capital, I stood on stage at the Women in Finance Awards, accepting recognition for innovation in ethical investment practices. Looking out at the audience, I saw my mother smiling proudly. My father sat beside her, still uncomfortable in this world where his daughter was celebrated for values he was only beginning to understand. Some of my team members cheered enthusiastically from their table. Hannah Baker nodded approvingly from the judges' section. "The path of integrity isn't always the easiest one," I said in my acceptance speech. "Sometimes it means standing alone, even against those you love. Sometimes it means choosing painful truth over comfortable lies." I paused, thinking of all that had been lost and gained in the past year. But integrity isn't just about following rules. It's about building success that can withstand scrutiny, that serves a purpose beyond profit, that leaves the world better rather than worse. In finance, where trust is our only true currency, integrity isn't just an ethical choice, it's the only sustainable business model. The applause was gratifying, but more meaningful was the knowledge that I had stayed true to myself through the most difficult challenge of my life. I had lost my family and found them again, not as they were, but as they could be. I had risked my company and seen it emerge stronger. I had faced my brother's betrayal and my own difficult choices and survived both. Real business isn't about crushing others or cutting corners, I concluded. It's about creating value that stands the test of time. It's about lifting people up rather than climbing over them. And sometimes, it's about having the courage to say no when everyone around you is saying yes. As I left the stage to enthusiastic applause, I felt a sense of closure. The Mitchell family saga would continue. Healing is rarely linear, and old patterns die hard. But I had found my voice and my place in the world, not as Robert Mitchell's daughter or James Mitchell's sister, but as Audrey Mitchell, a woman who knew her own worth and stood by her own values, whatever the cost. Have you ever had to stand up for what's right, even when it cost you relationships with people you cared about? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the hardest business decisions are the ones that affect our personal lives. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need encouragement to choose integrity, even when it's difficult. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember that true success is built on honesty, not shortcuts. Until next time.